Welcome to the You Can Make a Living in the Music Industry podcast from Nashville, Tennessee. I am your host, John Martin Keith. Celebrities, working class musicians, and people who work behind the scenes in all areas of the music industry will share their stories, encourage you, and give practical advice of ways you can make a living doing what you love in the music industry. This episode is brought to you by Edenbrook Productions. Edenbrook Productions is the company I founded to help musicians grow in their craft. Are you a songwriter, but maybe you've been told your songs aren't quite there yet? Or are your songs ready, but you don't feel stage ready? Or maybe music is your passion, but you feel imprisoned by your day job and you don't know what to do next to make your dream a reality. Well, Edenbrook Productions is here to help. We offer consulting services via phone call, Skype, and FaceTime. And for the You Can Make a Living in the Music Industry podcast listeners, we're offering an introductory 1-hour consultation special. Click on the link in the show notes to contact me, and let's get you making a living in the music industry. Hey everyone, welcome to the show today. This week I'm talking with Pam Lewis of PLA Media here in Nashville. PLA is a public relations company that gets their clients in front of audiences and consumers through public appearances on TV and in print. Pam has an amazing history of being one of the people who launched MTV in the early 80s and also helped launch the careers of Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood. We are discussing the abilities you need to have to work for a PR firm, as well as what it takes to start your own PR company. Please enjoy my conversation today with Pam Lewis. Hey everyone, I am hanging out with Miss Pam Lewis of PLA Media here in Nashville, Tennessee. Hi Pam, how are you?
Such a pleasure to be here for season 4. I'm really honored.
Thank you. I'm excited to have you on, and just I'm grateful that you took the time out to do this. You're a busy lady.
Oh, not at all. It's my pleasure. Who doesn't like to talk about themselves?
That's true. There's not many people that I don't think don't enjoy talking about themselves. So, but thank you for taking the time. I wanted to bring you on because you are a publicist. PLA Media does publicity. And you're actually the first publicist that I've had on the podcast out of 4 seasons. I've tried to reach out into different facets of the music business, having different people on that kind of cover everything in the industry. And there's so many different things. People just kind of think about, naturally, the audience thinks of, there's an artist, there's a songwriter, and maybe a producer. And those are really probably the big 3 that people think of, when it comes to music. But there are so many things behind the scenes that make those people, that's the reason the public knows about them, because all the people behind the scenes that
That's the glue that holds it all together.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and that's what you do. So I wanted to have you on and to tell your story. And so if you would, just kind of tell us who you are, where you're from, and what got you into the music business.
Well, sure. And thanks again, Marty, for having me.
Sure.
I'm originally from upstate New York and grew up in a rural area in the beautiful Catskill Mountains, Hudson River Valley. And my dad and mother were self-made folks. They both went to college. My father became a school superintendent, principal, and my mother was a dental hygienist. And I just grew up with really very much Puritan ethic, hard work, turn the TV off, pick up a book, education is important, that sort of mindset. I went to a small high school, and my father, of course, picked all my teachers. And then I went to college on the Finger Lakes, and the college at that point was all women. It was founded in 1868. It's called Wells College. It's still around, and it's a great school. And it really allowed me to spread my wings. Spent a year abroad, lived in France for a while, traveled all over the place. I always loved to travel. And I always tell people, travel, make it a lifelong ambition to travel and to meet new people, see new countries, and get out of your comfort zone. It's really important to do that. So I love that. And as a matter of fact, I didn't want to come home. I was like, I guess I need to finish my senior year. So I came back to the States and finished up at Wells, and my parents were like, well, you should go get an MBA. And I was kind of sick of school. And my mom was like, well, you should work at the Federal Reserve Bank, because I had an econ degree. And I was like, I would rather slit my throat than work at the Federal Reserve. Because econometrics, all of that is just my eyes glaze over. Even though I had studied econ, I was really more in the arts. But I did interview, believe it or not, for the Federal Reserve Bank. And I got a job offer to work in advertising for Ted Bates Advertising, and it was just a really small job because I thought, wouldn't it be fun to write? Wouldn't it be fun to work in advertising? And then I had an offer, not in network television, but to work in cable TV. And that became a really pivotal decision for me. And I worked for a company that was a joint venture between American Express and Warner Communications. And they had formed an entertainment division, and they had Nickelodeon, which was a kids channel,
Right.
Non-commercial, all really pro-educational content. They had the movie channel, which was the first 24-hour channel of movies, and they did something really avant-garde at the time. They did what they call interstitial programming. So they were actually interviewing Scorsese and actors and in between films. And then they had something called the music channel that morphed into MTV.
Wow.
And they had something called the shopping channel. So they were really cutting edge at the time.
Okay.
And had I not taken that job, because to me it was like, who wants to work in cable television? I wanted to work in network television. I mean, I grew up watching Walter Cronkite. That's what I thought. But I sort of took a leap of faith. I think I was making $11,000 a year and living in Manhattan. So it was a little tight, but it was great training ground. And I had a powerful woman boss who was scary, but learned a lot from her, and living the dream. And through that experience, I met, because I was doing a lot of work at the MTV department, I met people in the music industry.
Okay.
And they ended up offering me a job to move to Nashville.
Okay. Let me stop you just for a second. I want to talk about MTV for a second. So you were on the cutting edge of the launch of
Yes.
MTV.
Yeah.
Music television. Everybody knows MTV, right?
Yeah, but it wasn't, nobody knew if it was going to succeed.
Right.
At the time.
This is early 80s. This is
early 80s,
Yeah.
exactly. And as a matter of fact, people don't realize this, it didn't launch in New York. It launched in New Jersey. We couldn't get the channel capacity for Manhattan cable.
Okay.
And my bosses were like, you have to take it 24 hours. The whole programming is based on it being 24 hours. And it was a concept that was hard to get people to wrap their brain around. And we had to explain to the writers at the time, the journalists, we would show them air checks. They would come into my office, they would lay on the floor and give them pillows, and they would watch these air checks with the VJs doing interviews and watching videos because they couldn't watch it at home. And we also needed commercials because it was commercial driven. So we needed two things. We needed the record labels to produce videos. We needed commercials to support it. So Madison Avenue couldn't see it. And the music centers were in LA, in New York, and they couldn't see it. So we had a real pickle trying to get people to kind of wrap their brain around it. So who had videos? International artists. David Bowie, Men at Work, Flock of Seagulls, Dexy Midnight Runner, the Buggles. They all had videos because there were video jukebox shows, and video jukebox, actually you could go into clubs in Europe, in Germany, etc., and you put in some coins and you could actually watch a video in a club.
Wow.
So they were really cutting edge over the U.S. artists at the time. So it's hard to believe looking back that it wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now,
Sure.
And of course it's morphed, and now there's all these different divisions of Viacom, MTV, and the different channels, and people say, oh yeah, well, it used to be about music. And it was definitely about music. And we also went through a lot of controversy at the time because we had Rick James who wanted us to play his music, and my bosses were like, this is not rock music, we can't play this. So he was calling us racist MFers. That was the cover of Billboard magazine. And also we would not play Michael Jackson. Now my opinion was, why wouldn't you play Michael Jackson? But I was definitely not making the decisions on programming. And so CBS said, either you play Michael Jackson or we're going to pull all of our videos. So guess what?
I've read about that, yeah.
Billie Jean got played,
Yeah.
Thriller got played, and the rest is history.
Yeah,
but at
took
the
off.
time, there were some cold feet about that. Hard to believe.
So what was your job specifically for MTV? What did you do to help get them going, or once they got going, what did you do?
I was doing publicity. I was
Okay.
covering interviews. We would have the artists would be doing interviews in the studio with Paul Simon, and I would just make sure we would get the photographs and service the press releases and edit and doing whatever correspondence. And
Okay.
it was early days of word processing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it was very, it was pretty cutting edge. I mean, I don't think I realized what a phenomena it was, to be honest. You just sort of get up in the morning, you go to work, and you don't. It was fun. It was really fun. I mean, I would be like 3 or 4 things to do every night, of this guest list and that guest list. And so it was a kid in a candy store living in Manhattan, as you can imagine.
Yeah. So can you, let's stop for a second. Can you just explain to the audience, grade school level, what is a publicist? What is your job as a publicist? What do you do for musicians and artists, and what is the role that you provide for them as that?
Well, the sort of existential thing I say is I listen to you, I hear your dreams, and I try to take your dreams and take it to the next level and make you a household name.
Okay.
I mean, that's in sort of the most esoteric way.
Okay.
And that can be through our press release, that can be through booking you for an event, helping you do a concert, promoting the concert, finding you a possible endorsement. And there's lots of different ways to do that. But it's basically taking someone, or really a publicist doesn't have to be for the music industry. It could be, I've worked with authors, we've worked with restaurants. Anybody who is wanting to take their dream and take it to the next level, they hire someone to help them get the word out. And that can be through a plethora of different areas. It could be through print, television, radio, social media, the internet, any of the huge opportunity in this communication age that we're in. So I always say people lament the internet. I say, well, in some ways it's great because it's leveled the playing field. Everybody's got a computer in their back pocket now.
Yeah.
So I'm not someone to hand-wring about that. I'm very glad that I've got to experience the old days of the music industry and the sort of old Nashville and the new Nashville. And there's a certain longing for the good old days, if you will. But I think people often, they have nostalgia about their roots, if you will. Mm-hmm. But it's also a very exciting time, and you can have people go viral at any moment. It could be you. It could be your song. It could be your melody that just takes off or gets sampled or whatever.
Do you find it harder or easier to work with an artist who is not signed to a label?
We mostly work with unsigned artists.
So you find it easier then, I would say, to some degree. Or maybe not easier. How is it different? How would you say that it's different to work with a indie artist as opposed to a labeled artist?
I've worked with both. Label, there's a lot more levels of bureaucracy.
Okay.
So I find that if you work with a label artist, you have a lot more meetings, and you have meetings about meetings.
Right.
And you have many, many more people copied on emails, and many more people's opinions that you're addressing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're dealing with the ego of the artist, and you're dealing with the ego of the managers and the ego of the marketing department, and all of that at times makes the job more difficult.
Okay.
Now, that said, having the push and the marketing money and the tour support of a label is very important, but those days are fewer and far between. Mm-hmm. That doesn't happen anymore as much as it used to. I mean, there were probably 11 or 12 labels when I moved here, and everything's been consolidated. There are very few labels. So it used to be, if you didn't have a label deal, you were pretty much dead in the water.
Yep.
And you also had to go into a studio. You had to have a studio. You had to pay a producer and an engineer, and now people are producing things on their laptop that sounds just great. And you had to travel to write with someone, and now you can Zoom. And you look at all of the freedom we have mm-hmm. that we didn't have not that long ago, really.
Yeah. Do you think that the budget that a label provides for publicity is, I'm assuming it's going to be much higher than an indie artist is probably going to be able to offer for the same services.
Not necessarily.
Really?
Not necessarily, because I really think that I think PR is often misunderstood, not credited, and not as valued as other parts of the business. There's a lot of label waste. So there's a lot of money spent on radio promotion, for example. Mm-hmm. If you don't want to chase radio, you can save a lot of money. There's also a lot of money spent in the traditional production that it's always been hard to recoup because you have these huge budgets. So do you have to spend that in order to produce a great record? Maybe not necessarily.
Sure.
So it's a lot of gamesmanship.
Okay.
And the old adage is you always have to sue to get paid anyway in the business. You've got to audit and sue to get paid. So it's never been the most crisp, clean business. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I'm not saying that everyone is dishonorable, but it's really easy way to hide money.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. We'll come back to some of those things here a little bit, but let's get back to, so you were working MTV, Nickelodeon, and those different types of programs on cable in New York, and then you got an opportunity to come to Nashville. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I got an opportunity to actually come for an interview.
Okay.
And I had been here, my family came on a vacation during the World's Fair. And I thought it looked a lot like upstate New York, rolling hills, etc. And that appealed to me. But I did not want to live here. I mean, who in the world would leave Manhattan to move to Nashville? I had met some people. Funny enough, this is what you do when you're not fearful. I had a boyfriend who got hired to work a lot of the record label's artists to do grip and grin photos backstage and to shoot concerts. And he would shoot every genre of music. And he was an Italian guy from New York, from Brooklyn, and he detested country music, Christian music, country music. He was a rocker. He was like, hung out with Eric Clapton. Yeah. That was his bag. So he called me up and he's like, oh man, I've got to go to the Meadowlands and I've got to shoot Alabama. Do you want to come with me? I'm like, sure, I'll come.
Yeah. And
I was just a kid. So I'd get a backstage pass and I'd be backstage at Alabama. And I had really no reason to be there. I was just hanging out. And there were people standing around. I had no idea who they were. And they're like, what do you do? And I said, I work at MTV. And they're like, you do? You work at MTV? So who I was talking to? The head of the label. Joe Galante, Randy Goodman, Tony Brown. I had no idea who they were. The publicist. So they wanted to get to know me because I worked in MTV. And they're like, can we get you, can you get us some swag? Like, we really want to get a T-shirt. Can you get us a T-shirt? And I thought they were nice people, and I didn't mind country music. I listened to Poco and Crosby, Stills and Nash, and I loved that kind of music. And I was not a heavy rocker, although I liked some rock stuff too. So we exchanged business cards, and the publicist would call me, and she's like, Pam, I need to get to the Village Voice. Who do I talk to at the Village Voice? Well, call Bob Christgau. And then she called me and she's like, we're trying to have so-and-so's playing wherever. And so she would pick my brain for contacts. And we're looking for a video producer. Who would you recommend? We just got to be phone friends. So one day she called me up and I didn't have time to take her call. And I thought she probably just needed another telephone number. So she calls back again and she's like, listen, this is important. I need to talk to you. And I was like, what do you need? I'm busy, Cindy. She said, you need to come interview for a job in Nashville. I'm leaving. I'm getting married, and we need to fill this job. And they like you. They met you. You should come and do this. And, of course, Joe used to be from New York. He was born and raised in New York. So I think he liked the fact that I had the New York sensibility. So I said, I don't want to live in Nashville. She said, listen, just shut up. Just come. We're going to send you a ticket, call in sick, and come. So I did. I called in sick. On the way to the airport, I stopped and picked up a copy of Billboard. And I thought, somewhere in here is a country chart. I don't know where it is, but it's in here somewhere. Finally, I'm leafing through. I find it. I look, and it says, okay, RCA. And I checked all of the songs that were RCA songs, RCA artists. And I really didn't want the job. And I think because I didn't want it and I was confident, and I started talking about islands in the stream and congratulations or whatever, they offered me the job. And I thought, oh my God, I don't really want this. So then I tried to talk them into letting me stay in New York. And can't I just come like once a month and I'll commute? And, really, this is like where all the power is in New York and all the media, blah, blah, blah. No, that was not going to work. So I grudgingly moved here. I mean, and when I tell grudgingly, it was grudgingly. And I was devastated. Like, it was such culture shock for me. I could not watch Woody Allen movies. Anything that had New York in it, it would make me depressed. And it would make me homesick. I left my family. I was in love with a guy. I left him. And I thought, what have I done? And I did that for a year. And then I got fired. Then I really thought, what have I done? So the guy that I was in love with, I had been seeing him long distance. I called him up and I said, yeah, well, guess what, Andy, I got fired. And he was like, well, and guess what? I'm in love with someone else. So it's like one of the worst days of my life ever. Goodness. Doesn't get any worse than that. So I just limped around and felt sorry for myself and finally said, well, this is really boring. This pity party is really boring. And then I started to, I went to a career counselor and I started complained about my life. And eventually I kind of got some help. I got a little bit of help with career and just kind of got my head on straight. I started really getting back to my spiritual growth, and I started owning what I could have done differently, or what was the teachable moment here. So then I started rolling up my sleeves and being open to Nashville, where I hadn't been. I was mad at Nashville. I moved here. And I had been promoted and promoted and promoted the whole time I was living in New York. And I moved here, and this two-bit town kicked me on my rump. And I was mad. And I didn't know a lot of people either, so I was lonely. And when I started to bless Nashville and embrace Nashville and love Nashville, Nashville started to love me back. And great things started to happen. And you get what you put out, basically. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that happened was a phone call to have, the same people that I met backstage. Now, Tony Brown had been at RCA. He was now at MCA. So he was like, oh, yeah, I remember you. Hey, you want to work with Patty Loveless? Hey, would you like to work with Nicolette Larson? Hey, how about Lyle Lovett? You want to work with Lyle Lovett? You want to work with Steve Earle? So he would throw me work. And I was doing independent PR for them.
Okay.
So it kept me afloat, basically. Yeah. And the CMA threw me some projects, and one thing led to another. And then a guy named Bob Doyle called me, and he was hard to read. I had several meetings with him. I didn't know what the hey he wanted from me. But finally he said that he was going to leave ASCAP and form a management company, and would I be interested in working with him? And we would partner in a management company. And for the life of me, I was like, well, all right. And so we formed Doyle Lewis Management. And Bob had met this guy named Garth Brooks. And Garth needed help. So
just getting started at the time.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And Bob had decided to publish him. And so the rest is history. So that was about 8 years of my life. And because I'd been dumped and I had been so humiliated, all I did was work. Like I was just humping, and eye on the prize. And I think it took that kind of tenacity to do what we did. And we were on a wing and a prayer. We didn't have all this big investment money behind us. We didn't have sponsorships. We just kind of like, how much money do you have in your bank account? Let's pool our resources. Mm-hmm. And we were on Capitol Records, which was not the top label. So it was just really very magical time to be alive, and I'm glad I was young, and I'm glad that I had that opportunity. I'm really proud of the work we did. It was not without turmoil and trials and tribulations. And I had already started a PR firm. So when RCA fired me, and MCA and the CMA and some other companies started to throw work my way, I thought, well, I'll form a PR company. And I've always wanted to have my own company, so I'll just do it. And I was sort of working out of my house and had a Selectric typewriter and banging out press releases and bios or whatever. And I didn't really think that any label would hire me because I'd been fired by the top label. And I sort of felt like I was blackballed.
Okay.
That may not have been true, but that's the way I felt.
Sure.
I had felt a lot of shame and a lot of defeatism. So I thought, well, I can start my own company. I can hang my own shingle out. And I never wanted to close it because I never knew if Garth was going to be successful. So Garth started to take off a little bit, and I started to get busier. So I hired people to run the company, run my PR company. And then Bob and Garth were like, well, you should close that. And I'm like, well, you've got other things you're doing, and I just don't really want to do that. And I was like, well, Tammy Wynette never gave up her musician's license. Like, I don't want to, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Aren't I working hard enough for you? Mm-hmm. So I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I never closed it, and I still have the company. And
so the management company was working with Garth, correct?
Correct.
So who was doing PR for Garth if you weren't?
Me.
You were doing PR, mm-hmm. But it was through the...
In-house.
It was in-house through the management company.
At Doyle Lewis, yeah.
Okay, I see. That makes sense.
But I wasn't getting paid as a publicist. We were just, at that point, there were no 360 deals. So it was all commissioned income.
I see.
So part of the time I wasn't getting paid at all because there was no money coming in. So it was willing to put sweat equity in.
Sure. Okay. And so now I know you've worked with Garth. You've worked with Trisha Yearwood.
Right. Got her deal as well.
Okay. You've worked with Alabama.
Oh, golly, yeah. Well, that was all RCA, Alabama. And
the Judds, Kenny Rogers.
Yep, Dolly.
Dolly Parton. That was all, but was that doing PR or was that doing management for you?
PR.
That was doing PR. Through RCA Records at the time? Is that correct?
That was RCA, yeah.
Okay.
And then MCA was the people I mentioned earlier, Steve Earle and Nicolette and Patty Loveless and Lyle. And so they had some interesting like left of center projects. Deep Ellum was one of the projects that we worked. And then I had other independent acts that I worked with as well. And Bob and I had independent artists that we represented. And some of them, we had Great Plains who were wonderful, Jack Sundred and those guys, and Hank Flamingo, and Buddy Monlock, a folk, kind of in the tradition of Townes Van Zandt and Guy Clark.
So PLA Media, you've had that pretty much the whole time that you were here in Nashville.
Yes.
Once you left RCA, you started that, and then you went to work for the management company.
Right.
And kind of had that on the side. And then once you left management, then PLA Media became your main thing, correct?
Right. And what I did, it was Pam Lewis and Associates, but when Bob and Garth felt threatened and said, you really need to get rid of this, I renamed it PLA Media. And I thought, well, if there isn't a Doyle Lewis Management and a Pam Lewis and Associates, maybe they will feel less threatened. I will take my name off of this, and it'll just be PLA Media, which is short for Pam Lewis and Associates. That was kind of my, out of respect to them, feeling like, oh, you should close this kind of thing.
Yeah. What is it that you think, what would you say is the most important aspect of being a publicist for an artist? Like, what is it? Is it getting them on print, or is it social media nowadays, or all the different facets that a publicist does for an artist? Like, what are those things that really stick out to you, being this is the biggest thing that you can get a return on investment from? Does that make sense?
I would say yes. In answer to your question, I don't think there's any one silver bullet.
Okay.
I mean, it used to be, if you were on the Ed Sullivan Show, that was it.
Yeah.
If you were on Carson, that was it. That's all you had to do. So there's many ways to find success. I think being a good publicist is helping connect the dots and looking for those opportunities and not looking for the obvious opportunities, and also being really tenacious. So if you go to one editor and they say no, find another angle. Find another way to enter the door. Or maybe you're not getting success promoting a particular album, we'll say, or song. Mm-hmm. Maybe you'll get a story because this particular person you're working with has a charity that they're involved with, or they have a collection. Maybe they loved their gourmet cook. Maybe they volunteer at a soup kitchen. I don't care why they get written about, as long as they get written about.
Okay.
And while they're getting written about, because they're volunteering for Second Harvest, There's a paragraph in there about their new album.
Mm-hmm.
So you just you don't give up. And I think with life in general, people quit too early.
Sure, I agree with that.
You have to look at the long range. I've got to believe that one of the most disheartening, but also the most blessing professions in the world is writing and songwriting, because you are fraught with so much defeat. So many times you write a great song and it gets turned down, or it never gets picked up, or it never even gets heard. So why do you write? Because you can't not write. It's in your DNA. That's what you do.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So to me, I look at it like a challenge. It's like, okay, this person needs to be marketed. What can I do to find a way to make that happen? What is the challenge to make that happen?
Mm-hmm.
And make sure that you're writing a compelling pitch. Make sure that when you're on the phone with someone, if you're lucky enough to get someone on the phone, first thing you say is, are you on deadline? Have you got time to talk? Because if they are on deadline, don't bother.
Okay.
Call back another time.
That's good advice.
And just be tenacious. And at any given outlet, there's usually potentially other people that you can go to. And there are some editors that would rather talk to a woman. There are some that would rather talk to a man. One of my early teachers said, find common ground. Whoever you get on the phone, find common ground. So you can talk about the weather, you can talk about sports, you can talk about, hey, how was your Easter? How was your Passover? Whatever.
Yeah.
Find some common ground. Become a human being.
Right.
And then when you build that confidence, they're more likely to take your call.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't waste their time. You don't go off in tangents. You're succinct. And you're very appreciative.
Sure.
Thank you for taking my call. I know you don't have to talk to me. Thank you very much. You can't be brusque. You can't be entitled. I would say a lot of people that come here, and we have an internship program, they don't like to talk on the phone. That strikes fear in them. So
they're so used to texting nowadays, or Facebook or social media, whatever.
All of the above.
Yeah.
And they also they don't value words.
Yeah.
It's harder for them to. You don't find as many good writers. And they don't read. They don't read for fun. They read because they have to.
Mm-hmm.
Or they read because they're Googling something. But just the joy of picking up a book, you don't see it as often.
Yeah.
And I think Mary Martin, who was one of the great A&R people and managers, she was managing Vince Gill. She had a sign in her office, and the sign said, if you don't read, you can't write. And I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Mm-hmm. When in an artist's career do you suggest that they would hire a publicist? Just like when an artist starts out, they don't automatically get a manager. They don't need one when they first start out.
There's nothing to manage.
Right, exactly. Until they start getting some, they're out playing shows around their hometown or in the region or things like that, and they start getting some exposure, and that gives a reason for a manager to come on and start putting them into other opportunities. So in that same context, like when would you see that it's a good idea for someone to hire a publicist for an artist to do?
Well, I think you need to, if you're an artist, and I understand the sanctity, if you will, of being an artist, how difficult that is, especially if you are also a singer-songwriter. And there's an art, and there's a certain amount of divine intervention to being an artist. I get that. But just because you want to write and just because you want to sing doesn't mean that anybody cares or anybody is going to buy what you do.
Right.
They don't have to. You are not entitled to that.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I say to people, if there's anything else you can do, anything
do it,
that will make you happy, do it.
You're not the first person that has been on the show to say that very same thing.
No, Willie Nelson was asked, what would you be doing if you weren't doing this? If you weren't successful? He said, what do you mean? This is what I do. So if that's what you do, that's what you do.
Yeah.
You ask Van Gogh, what would you do? Van Gogh was a painter. That's what he did. That was his raison d'etre. He was following his bliss. Okay, so this is the same thing with music. But I used to get so annoyed when people would send me unsolicited songs and they'd be livid that I didn't listen to them because I was busy. Like, excuse me, you didn't ask to send it. You didn't ask if I was looking for songs, listening to songs, had any interest in you. And now you're mad at me because you sent me a song that I didn't ask for because I'm busy working with people who I am working with who are paying me.
Right.
So I understand tenacity. I get that. But don't be rude.
Right.
So I would say that you meaning the artist, have to want it better and more than your wife wants it for you, or your mother wants it for you, or I want it for you. Mm-hmm. This is your life work. Treat it like a business. And people come to us all the time. Get me a booking agent. Well, how many dates do you have on the books? None. Well, why would a booking agent want to book you when you have no reason for them to think that there's any demand for you?
Yeah.
I mean, you can pick up the phone and book yourself. People do it all the time.
Yep.
Make up a name. Say that you're the artist management calling. I don't really care. There's ways to get it done. But you have to treat it like a business. And if you don't, I always say there's not as much artist development anymore. So you have to look at it as a business. You have to you have to act like a business person. You have to return phone calls. You have to be on time. You have to look appropriate. I always am impressed when people write thank you notes, which very rarely happens, or text or call, even, hey, thanks for taking time, Mm-hmm. And I think that they're just like, it's less necessary than in other areas because our job is to create a buzz. So it's helpful if there's something to work with. Like we have someone that we work with who was on American Idol. So there was already a little bit of a buzz.
Sure.
But we're helping take it to the next level. We're helping fine-tune that. We're helping to brand that person. So I think the key is to... I think sometimes people look at the music industry, and I see it with other businesses, and they don't take it seriously. They don't realize how difficult it is. If you have any success at all, if you have a song cut, the odds are against you. If you happen to get a gold or platinum record, the odds are against you. As a woman, the odds are against me still. It's better. So instead of recognizing that and being like, wow, they must be good or they must have worked hard, it's like, well, it's in the music industry. You can't take those people seriously. They're all on drugs and, they don't get up before noon and whatever.
Right, yeah.
And I've found that dealing with government where they don't realize what the music industry contributes to this town. They give lip service, but they don't really, they're going to give a lot more credence to the Nissan Stadium, to football team, for example. Mm-hmm. Nothing against, I'm glad we have a pro football team, but the lifeblood of this town is still
music, yeah.
The music industry.
That's why it's called the Music City.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
let me ask you this. So if someone wanted to an artist wants to hire you, mm-hmm. PLA Media, to do publicity for them, can anyone hire you? Do they need to have an album out? Do they need to be touring so many dates a year before you'll start working with someone? Or do you see that as your job is to get their name and their face and their story out there so that people will want to, in turn, come see them or want to book them or things like that?
Well, Marty, people come in various stages.
Okay.
So there have been people saying, hey, you know what? I've got some songs. Help me get it to the next level. So people come either looking for songs, so then we will help do a song search. Sometimes they'll come and they want a producer. Or they have an album, but they need it packaged. So we provide graphic design. So it just depends. Most people come and they have already done something. They have a single done, or they have a EP done or something. Mm-hmm. But it just depends. I've worked with people that have nothing going on and they have some investment money, or they've done a GoFundMe or something. They have a little bit of money to work with. Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this.
My job is to make whatever they have be as professional as possible.
Sure. What all does PLA Media do? Because you're not just a publicity company. I should have said that from the outset. You do more than just publicity.
Yes.
Some companies that are just publicity. That was a reference for my question.
I see.
At what point does someone hire you as a publicist?
Well, it depends on what you're looking for. Here's what we offer. I'll go backwards.
Sure.
We offer graphic design.
Okay.
Do you need a logo? Do you need branding? Do you need a bio? Do you need a website designed? We do all of that. Are you touring, but you want to get more people, more butts in seats? We do tour press. So it's sort of like we are acting more as what a management company would do and what a traditional artist development department at a record label. We sort of try to shore up all those needs.
Okay.
So that an artist is free to be an artist.
Okay.
Because sometimes when you're wearing all those hats, it's difficult. And that's what often will happen. Artists will be at a plateau. They'll get to a certain level. You need a little bit of help. Or you need a brain trust. You need someone to say, hey, let me listen to what you have. Here's what I would recommend releasing. Or what we might do is send out your product to a trusted radio promoter, even if they don't hire them. Just say, hey, of these songs, where would you think about releasing them? Which song would you release? Could you give some input? But often the artist doesn't have those, they don't have those connections.
Right.
They may need a video promoter. They don't know who to call. We do. They might want to work on possibly having a Spotify promoter. They don't know who to talk to. And they're not sure if they're going to be calling someone reputable. I mean, I really want to be sure that people don't get ripped off. And it's not the nicest business. And that does happen from time to time. Mm-hmm. We've had people come to us and they've just gone through their life savings and they're just bereft with, this is what happened to me.
Yeah.
So we try to help sweep up the pieces and help them get to the next level.
Can you say, at least on an estimate level, of what it costs if someone wants to hire PLA Media? Since we're talking to you, that we'll use you if we can. Like, what is the cost for someone to hire PLA Media to be a publicist?
It depends on what they're looking for. I would say very bare minimum, $2,000 to $2,500 a month.
Okay.
And then if you want additional services, it would escalate from there. If you wanted also social media as well on top of that. Okay.
And that's just a continuing every month as long as they're working with you?
It doesn't have to be. Most people we work with, it's a monthly retainer. Some people will do it a la carte. And typically what I try to say is, if you really want an impact, you need to be with us at least 3 months just to kind of roll up our sleeves and get a little bit of momentum. Mm-hmm. Most of our clients, they stay with us, or the only time they might break services, they need to channel money into another venue. They maybe they're going to do a photo shoot, or maybe they're going to go in the studio, or they want to buy a bus or something. So typically, we are very, very lucky that our clients stay with us, or we found that this very often, they will refer us other business. They'll call their friends and say, hey, you know what, they did a good job for me. You need to talk to them. Mm-hmm. So we try to look at it like it's an extended family. I know that sounds corny, but...
No, not at all. No, because they are you're an extension of what they do as an artist. Mm-hmm. You know, like you're getting their face out to the audience, to the masses, you know, for people to know who they even are. So, I mean, there's definitely legitimacy in what you guys do. I mean,
well, and it's such a vulnerable thing to do.
Yeah.
To get up on stage and to bare your soul. That's not easy to do.
Yeah.
And I look at it as an honor to work with them, but to try to protect them and try to surround them with support.
So, as far as advice goes, now you're giving advice all throughout this whole interview, and it's been fantastic. If somebody wants to get into being a publicist, whether they want to start their own company or they want to come work for a company like PLA Media, mm-hmm. what are the steps? Let's take it. Let's do this. Let's talk about if you want to start your own company. What are the steps?
Work for someone first.
Work for another company first.
Yes. Make sure it's something you want to do.
Okay.
I mean, first of all, you have to ask yourself, do I want to be an entrepreneur?
Mm-hmm.
Do I have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? And it takes a certain mindset to do that. Because there's going to be good months and bad months. Do I have the intestinal fiber to have a lean month and not get panicked? Or am I the kind of personality that I need a steady paycheck every week? Not everybody's cut out for it. I'm more of a risk taker.
Yeah.
So for me, it worked.
How long would you say someone should work for someone else, for another company before they jump out onto their own?
I would, first of all, don't leave unless you have clients that you can take, and be mindful because you probably have an employment contract.
Sure.
So you want to leave as honorably as possible.
Yeah.
Don't burn bridges. Make sure, figure out what your nut is. If you want to start a company, what's your nut? Can you do it by yourself? Do you need an assistant? What's that assistant going to cost? How many retainers do you need at how much in order to cover your budget? I mean, it's just like trying to buy a house or anything else. It's what can you afford to do?
Yeah. So,
and I wouldn't leave until you feel that, do you have the contacts so that somebody walks in and puts their hard-earned money down? Can you provide them a valuable service?
Yeah.
If you're learning still yourself and you don't know who to call at the Tennessean, it's probably a little early for you to do that. Do you have the money to pay for Cision, which provides you with contacts? Do you have the money to pay for a list of podcasters? All of that costs money. Do you have the money to buy a computer? that is the caliber of what you need.
Yeah.
Do you want to work out of your house, or do you think you need to have an office on Music Row?
Yeah.
I mean, these are all big questions you have to ask.
Sure.
Now, it's since the pandemic, certainly it's more acceptable to work out of your house. I had a client, interestingly enough, I had Nancy Griffith. I really wanted to work with her. And she didn't hire me because I was working out of my house.
Oh, really?
That many years ago.
Yeah.
So that was like a slap against me that I wasn't serious or I wasn't successful enough that I should really have a proper office.
Yeah. And nowadays that's normal.
Yeah, it's not uncommon, but it's also fine to have an office as well. Or you can be, in our case, we work partially virtual and partially in the office. So we do in-person meetings all the time. So we have that flexibility. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, you can't give people back their time. So the more, as a boss, the more that I can make it easy for people to work for me and that they feel appreciated and they have plenty of time and freedom, they're going to be happier employees and hopefully stay with me.
Sure.
Nobody wants to live and breathe work.
Yeah. You got to know when to turn it off for the night. Yep. Go home and
you got to have boundaries. You have to have boundaries because I will tell you, people in the music industry are often brilliantly creative, very, to get up on stage, it takes a certain amount of moxie to do that. But I find often it's this ego juxtaposed with insecurity, and it's a teeter-totter. So people that need applause to feel happy, that's insecurity. Most people are terrified to get up on stage. That's like a number one fear, public speaking. Mm-hmm. So you look at all these wonderful people that live here that have no problem doing that, or they might have a little bit of stage fright, but it's part of what they do is singing, sharing their music, sharing their stories, and getting paid for it and getting applause. That's the currency in their life. That's how it works. That's not the way most people live. Most people, the idea of going from city to city to city and being a traveling troubadour, it sounds good on paper. It's not that glamorous. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
You're on stage for an hour and a half, 2 hours, but what did it take to get there?
Yep.
So I guess what I'm trying to say to you is the people that I know, and I love working with creative people, but you have to have boundaries because if you don't, they will call you. They will text you Sunday afternoon, 2 a.m, whatever. That will happen. So if you want to have a life, which to me it's important to have boundaries, then you have to start off with those rules. If you don't care and you want to live and breathe the business, they're not your friends, they're your clients. So that doesn't mean you can't care for them deeply, which I care very much for my clients, but they're not my friends, they're my clients. So I have that kind of clear balance.
Yeah.
And that sounds kind of cold. I don't mean it to be.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's knowing to separate. I mean, I think you can have a friendship with people in the process, but I understand what you're saying. I completely get it. I think the audience will understand that. You've got to be able to separate work from play.
And here's the kicker. It's not like you're working at a meat packing plant. Okay. Yeah. You're working promoting music, and music is fun. Yeah. And music is endorphins. And so it's really hard to shut it off. So for me anyway, and not everybody feels that way. There are other people I know in the business where they live and breathe their clients and they know about their personal life and all this stuff. I don't need to know about your marriage. I don't need to. It's not my business. Yeah. You know, I mean, I'll listen a little bit, but I'm not a marriage counselor. You know, yeah. That's not what I do.
Yeah, they're hiring you to do a job, and so you're going to do that job just like anybody else. No, I completely get that.
And I think if you're not careful, those lines are very easily blurred.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get a balance in your life. I have certainly at times been very much out of balance, very much. And so that goes along more with artist management, where I think, again, I mean, I can remember one of the early managers for the Judds. I mean, the Judds moved in with him and his wife for 2 or 3 years because he was kind, I guess, and I don't know. I mean, I was like, wow, that was quite a commitment.
Yeah.
And they ended up leaving him and going somewhere else. But I mean, name any other business that would happen. Any other business.
Yeah. Interesting.
So there's all these cross-pollinated relationships and boundaries and that are kind of blurred.
Yeah. And one of the things I know you have to be really careful of is as you do build relationships, you have to be careful not to burn those bridges, not to ruin a relationship and a friendship, because I think inevitably if you work with someone long enough, you're going to create a friendship with them, hopefully.
Familiarity breeds contempt.
Yeah. So you just have to be really careful that you don't overstep boundaries and things like that.
Well, and also if you're an artist manager or if you're a publicist, you're dealing with really creative people, and creative people are sometimes vulnerable. And the reason they're great at what they do is they're able to access that part of their brain, that part of their creativity, or the God source, whatever you want to call that. But it also makes them, it's hard for them sometimes, I think, to mainstream into the rest of the world. And I think that's why so many people in the business struggle with addiction, struggle with mental health. You know, it makes these very strange bedfellows that are they're demons they have to fight with sometimes, and the greatest of the great have the biggest problems.
Yeah.
And we all know them. Many of them die an early death.
Yeah. Yeah. But you guys help manage it really, really well. So that's what we're grateful that.
We try.
Yeah. You know. So we're grateful that you guys do what you do as.
I mean, I have 2 floors of therapists next door that rent from me. Believe me, a lot of their clients are music people. Yeah. And truthfully, I mean, thank God they're here.
Yeah, sure.
And I think a lot of people still dealing with pandemic and a lot of the turbulence in the world, they're even more frail. They're even more vulnerable. Yeah. And when you add to it that they're creatives, it makes them even more raw, if you will.
Sure. Well, as we wrap up, I could sit and talk to you for a long, long, long time, but I know you've got other meetings to take care of. So
I hope this is helping.
This is amazing. This is great. Thank you so much for doing this.
You're very nice.
Just to wrap up, you've already given tons of advice. Just as we wrap up, though, is there anything else, do's, don'ts of being in the business as either as management or as a publicist? What would you... Anything you haven't said that you would like to say that would be helpful to listeners that want to get into this, do what you do?
As a publicist, I think there's a lot of things that make a good publicist, or just make a person who's going to be successful in business. Like people. If you don't like people, this is not the right arena to be in. Learn how to work a room. Learn how to get out of the comfort zone. Learn how to sublimate your own ego, because you're going to do a lot of listening. To be good at what you do, to be a good manager, to be a good publicist, you're going to have to put that other person ahead of you. Listen. Be a good listener. Learn how to write. Words should be important to you. Learn how to write a letter. I mean, it's amazing how people don't know how to write a letter. Learn how to talk on the phone. Sounds real basic. Have good table manners. So few people do. And people notice it. I do anyway. I had someone last week give me 2-day notice and quit her job. That is burning a bridge. And then said, I didn't know that I should have given 2 weeks. Really? Yeah. And that was just pretty devastating. So that, unfortunately, it's a small town. If someone called about her and she was a good worker, I would not give a good recommendation, because that was such a lack of respect for us and left us in the lurch. Yeah. We'll get through it. We always do. So just realize what the ramifications. What I realized when I moved here is that it's a big, small town. You can have a lot of anonymity in New York City. You cannot hear. People talk.
Yep.
And you can do one bad thing. Especially if you're trying to be respected by artists, don't go out and get plowed with them. You got to be the adult in the room. You got to be the one that gets up and is able to make the 9:00 morning phone call, right, or whatever it is. Dress appropriately, especially if you're a woman. Watch what you post on social media. It will follow you the rest of your life. It is like styrofoam. And we have a woman that came to us. We didn't hire her because her social media was so skanky. She came in here with this plunging neckline, and I'm like, she's not an artist. She's, I don't want that kind of personality, and I'm not a prude at all, but that's not who I want representing my artist.
Sure.
You're not in competition with the artist. You are the adult in the room who is protecting that artist and making sure that you are presenting that person in a professional manner and yourself in a professional manner. Mm-hmm. I would watch vulgarity. I mean, I know someone totally out of the music business has lost so much respect because the way they speak. And the kind of people that they're interacting with, it has really hurt them, even though they're brilliant. And if they could shore that up, but unfortunately the damage is done.
Yeah.
You see, and sometimes there's no going back. If you're having a bad day, don't go out in public. just work at home, whatever. It's just not a great idea to go out and put that face out there. And I think also people perceive the music industry and the arts in general as being glamorous. So they might be in a very mundane job that they work, and so they look at what we do as, wow, that's exciting. And in many ways it is. It's very gratifying and it's fun. And I always hate to hear people complain. And I had an artist say to me one time, I'm so sick of hearing people complain about the business when they're driving around in a tour bus that costs more than most people's homes. Mm-hmm. And he said, and I will not use the vernacular that he used, he said, when I get into this club to perform, it doesn't matter, but I'm there to entertain, and I'm there to take these people away for a minute from whatever they're dealing with. If they need to grieve, I'm there to grieve with them. If they need to laugh, I'm there to laugh with them, or to tap their feet or let them dance. But the fact that I'm on this stage, most of them would give their left lung to be where I am.
Right.
And that's the truth of it.
Sure. But
that's not always what people in the business feel. They just feel like they feel apart from the rest of the world, and in many ways they are. And I heard something else funny one time. They said, when you play for a living, because what do we say? Oh, I played a gig. Well, what's the word? Play. It's not work, it's play. So I think that's part of why people don't take musicians seriously sometimes. Well, they're just musicians, they would work for free, and many of them do. Just go down low abroad,
Right, yeah.
So, the success, really, if there are a lot of other ways to make way more money. There's the lucky people that really make a killing, but they're not that many. But The other thing is, if you don't have to be a professional musician, you can sing in the church choir and still feel gratified. You can have a guitar pull at your house and learn how to play the guitar and go online and be the best musician you can for you and your friends and your family. You may not want to be an arena act. That may be more than you're willing to deal with. Mm-hmm. And there's no sin in that either. It's just what makes you happy.
Sure.
And not having regrets. If you will feel in 10 years, 20 years, when you're on your deathbed, I should have, then do it. And give yourself a limit of how much time you're willing to put into this.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Well, thank you.
My pleasure.
That's great. I'm super excited for people to hear this, and I know it's going to bless a lot of people and give people things to work on and to reach for, goals to reach toward in their careers as well. So
have fun, super grateful too. Just don't take it too seriously.
Absolutely.
Just have fun and lighten up. The world doesn't need more angst.
Yeah. The
world needs more love and levity and smiling, happiness. That's what we need. It's the best remedy. Well, more God.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and that's a perfect note to end on. So thank you for your time. I'm so grateful.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming to Historic Music Row.
I love being on Music Row. I haven't been down here for a while, so I'm grateful to get to come be down here.
Well, go look out front. We have a historic sign. So take a look at it. It tells about the history of this area. It has the original plat for the buildings.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Have a great day.
You as well.
All right, guys, there you have it. I hope you had a great time listening to our conversation today. I hope you take what we've talked about today and find ways to apply it to your career as well. Please be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you listen to it on. And please share it with all of your friends so that we can continue to get this message out to everyone around the world. Remember, Edenbrook Productions is here to help if you need consulting services via phone, Skype, Zoom, or FaceTime. Let us know how we can help you begin to make a living in the music industry.